Is 2023, and we are movie executives who've just seen a rough cut of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which Graham and I think is pretty good. But we're going to fix it as well as we usually do on the show. Cue that intro. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Mirror Movie Universe podcast. I'm Nate, one half of the hosting team of this shindig of a show, and across the aisle, across the country from me is not Dan. This is Graham, our cousin, who is going to talk with me about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, because Dan hasn't seen it and Graham has, and gosh darn, we both like it. Say hi, Graham.
Hello.
All right, we're going to be going through the film, the last, I hope, in the Indiana Jones series, and we're going to talk about our likes and our dislikes and what we would fix about it. But to do that, we're going to have to talk about what happens in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Graham, we're going to have to go back and forth on this because there's so much that happens.
There's too much. Just like with Highlander, there's so much in between set pieces, except in Highlander, which was the previous episode I was on.
Yeah.
Those is like the big pieces are in the fights, or like around the fights. Here it's like all the big stuff happens, and then there's a car chase.
Yes, absolutely. We'll talk about all the car chases or lack. Maybe we'll leave that out because there's quite a lot. But Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny opens in the past, in 1945 Germany, and they are losing the war pretty badly. Indiana Jones is as a young de-aged Harrison Ford, trying to get onto a train full of stolen artifacts that the Nazis have. At the head of this train is an evil Nazi named Voller, who's played by that guy from Star Wars. He was in Rogue One. I don't know his name. You can look him up. And he's trying to make his way through the train with his buddy Basil, who is this kind of short, stoutly guy played by that other guy from Doctor Who. And
fans might also recognize him as Arnim Zola from Captain America.
Oh, he was in Captain America, Winter Soldier, and the first one.
And the first one.
So they're going through this train. They're trying to find the spear of Longinus that pierced the side of Christ at the crucifixion, and is apparently this massive, terrifying weapon. It also shows up in another movie that we both like, Hellboy, not the remake, the first one from 2004, and is also a fixture of something that Hitler really wants. So I guess Dial of Destiny just did a Hellboy. But so they find the spear and figure out that it's a fake. But on this train also is this weird clockwork mechanism called the Antikythera. It's half of it. Apparently it's like this half moon kind of thing. And Basil seems rather obsessed with it. They jump off the train into a river along with the Antikythera, and Voller gets a train sign to the face and gets knocked off the train. We're going to fast forward like 35 years to 1969, where Indiana Jones is kind of in a rundown state of affairs. He's still teaching, not at the same college, but he's still teaching. He's separated from his wife, Marion Ravenwood, who shows up in several other Indiana Jones movies. And he's genuinely just down on his luck. There's a folded American flag on his mantelpiece, you can see, which suggests that his son it has been killed in Vietnam. His son, Mutt Williams, was played by Shia LaBeouf in the previous film. And that is later confirmed to be the case. He was killed in Vietnam. Indy is approached by Helena Shaw, who is Basil's daughter. And Basil, by this point, has passed away, and she leads him on the usual MacGuffin chase of Indiana Jones, trying to find the other half of the Antikythera. She is under the impression that it was left in that river when they jumped off the train, but that's not the case. Indy's got it in some back room somewhere, and when he goes to retrieve it with her, she knocks him out and runs with it. Turns out that she is not among the good-natured archaeological type. She is, in fact, in it for profit. She does not agree that it belongs in a museum. So she steals this thing and takes it to Tangier to sell at an auction. And Indy tries to go after her. There's a chase through the streets of New York on horseback in the middle of an Apollo 11 moon landing parade, because this is August of '69. And they eventually get to Tangier. Nazi from the beginning survived that fall off the train, and he is in the United States working with the CIA because he was grabbed by the United States after World War II as a scientist. And he is also after Indiana Jones, as is his Nazi buddies and the CIA. They get to Tangier, and there is a shootout at the auction. Helena Shaw's ex-boyfriend shows up, and it's very awkward. And there's another chase through the streets on these little buggy cars, and it's fine, I guess. He ends up with Helena, and the bad guys have the Antikythera, and they are trying to find the other half of it. We still don't really know what this device is about in general, and why it's so powerful. We know that Basil was obsessed with it, and it eventually took his life later, but we don't know much more than that. They go out on a boat and find an ancient Greek shipwreck and find the other half of the Antikythera there, and it seems to be something that Archimedes made. And back in the day, what could it be? They go to Greece and find Archimedes' tomb and put these two halves of the Antikythera together. No, they don't find the other half in the boat. They find like a plank that says it's going to be in the tomb, right?
I think something akin to that, yes.
Yeah. So they go to Archimedes' tomb, and which has as yet undiscovered. They solve some puzzles to get in, and Helena and Indy have kind of reconciled their differences. They see inscriptions of wristwatches and propellers and all these sorts of things in his tomb, and they don't really know what's going on.
They find a wristwatch.
They find a wristwatch.
Yes.
Which
Archimedes has a wristwatch on, and on his tomb is like carved propellers from a plane and some other weird cryptic imagery that feels a little anachronistic. It doesn't feel like it belongs in, 3rd century BC Greece.
No, not at all. And so the bad guys show up in the tomb, and there's a shootout, and Indiana Jones gets shot, and the as he has many times before, but he's an old man now, so we're really in jeopardy. There's a final showdown where they go to this airfield, and the bad guy, the old Nazi from World War II, he dresses up back into a Nazi uniform and gets on an old Nazi plane to fly with the Antikythera, because they have figured out that it's actually it predicts where time fissures will open up. And he thinks that he's going to go back to August of 1939, because there's a 1969 to 1939 connection. And his plan is not to go back and help Hitler out and win the war that way. No, his plan is to go back as a Nazi and kill Hitler, which is brilliant, by the way. And we'll talk about that later, but he's going to kill Hitler and take his place, because Hitler was an idiot and lost the war for Germany and made a lot of historical mistakes. So he's going to go back and kill Hitler. And so they take off in the plane, and Indiana Jones and Helena give chase, and they eventually get onto their plane, and Indiana Jones is captured, and he figures out that the calculations are wrong, because Archimedes could not have known about continental drift. And so instead of 1939, they go to another time and place. Graham, where do they get to? Summarize what happens next.
They go back in time, and they go to Syracuse, Italy, which is, of course, the wrong place to be going.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the ocean beneath them, we see ships reminiscent of triremes, and we see archaic battles. They go back to 3rd century BC. So I don't recall exactly when the Battle of Syracuse was, but I know Archimedes died in 212.
So because you studied this history in school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nate, Dan alluded to this in a past episode. Nate is a literal rocket scientist.
Yeah.
You just play with robots all day. That's all he really does.
Yeah. But yeah.
I studied history, especially classical history. So then this will come up much in the love section in a bit, because this film has a lot of special connections to me. So my opinions on it are a little biased.
I love it too. When I saw that moment where Indy looks out the window and he's like, those are Roman triremes, I'm like, Graham's gonna love this movie. It's gonna be great. So you get this awesome sequence where this German bomber, this Nazi bomber, is flying over this battle, and the Roman triremes, the Romans are like, they have dragons, the Greeks have dragons. and they start
Yeah.
shooting like ballista crossbow things at the plane, and the Nazis are freaking out, shooting at the Romans. And eventually they all end up crashing. The Nazis are killed, and Indiana Jones gets to meet Archimedes. It was a very powerful scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of the Antikythera is that it's supposed to allow you to travel through time and view time. Um, it wasn't meant as a travel device.
Mm-hmm.
Archimedes built it as a distress call for the
Mm-hmm.
Battle of Syracuse. Like he knew this battle was coming. He built this thing, which is really cool. We see it in an unfinished form
Yes.
brought to him by an assistant in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we so like he built that as a distress call. He wanted help to come, and he was like, "This is how it's gonna work, I guess."
Mm-hmm.
So like that's really really cool, and I loved that. And that's something else that we'll get into because this film gets a lot right,
Yes.
and that ties into one of the things that I think it gets very right.
Yes. And frankly, Indy thinks it's pretty awesome too, because he decides to
Yes.
stay in ancient Greece. He says, I'm going to stay here and be with Archimedes and live in history, because his life is in shambles. His son is dead.
Mhm.
He's separated from his wife.
And
Um,
he's still shocked. He's like, this is
yeah,
the best that I'm gonna get. Like,
yeah,
why would I go back to that when I'm gonna die? Yeah, I might as well die here and witness something that I've studied and
yes,
witness that because he's a historian too, first and foremost. Like,
yeah,
he wants to see that.
yes. But halfway through delivering the speech summarizing what you just said, Helena just knocks him out and the screen
Yeah.
goes black. And he
Yes.
wakes up in his apartment in New York. And Helena's there, and Sala is there, and he's brought his kid, Sala from the original films. And Marion Ravenwood comes back. And they have this really sweet repetition of a moment from Raiders of the Lost Ark where they kiss and all of this kind of stuff. And he's
Where
back in
does
New
it
York,
hurt?
and yeah, where does it hurt thing. And they the film just ends with Indy and Marion in their apartment, and it's that like
Mm,
I thought that was kind of sweet. But
it
there's
was.
I think that I had a lot of fun with this movie when I saw it in theaters opening day, because Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie ever. I knew that you would love it because you studied this stuff. But I want to hear it from the mouth of the man. So what do you love about Dial of Destiny, good sir?
I think first and foremost,
Mm.
there's a couple of personal things about this movie that I like. They're not really the movie itself.
Yeah.
Um, you alluded to one of them. I love history,
Mm-hmm.
classical history, especially ancient Greece, ancient Rome, ancient Israel. Right around this time period is where I get really interested.
Mm-hmm.
So to see them just kind of flip the script and go there instead was really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And, I already loved the movie to begin with, but I fell in love with it really hard there. Like
Yeah.
that was really cool. Um, I had a lot of fun with that because that is like his decision to stay is something that really resonated with me
Mm-hmm.
because that's a huge struggle for any historian. Like all the stuff that we study is in the past. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's already done, it's happened. We can just comment on it and add our thoughts or like add a new perspective. Um, there's we can't go and see it. It's not like you can be a part of the space program or like people can still work on curing diseases or things in the science field or like
Right.
stuff like that. Historians, most of the time, we don't even get to find this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's already like the archaeologists find it.
Mm-hmm.
We just talk about it and describe what it means.
Mm-hmm.
So like to be able to see that and stay there, especially when his life is in shambles. And
Yeah.
this has so much meaning to him. Like that's a choice that really resonated with me in theaters.
So
Um,
let me ask you then, you're an old man, you're in your 80s, you got a bullet in your kidney, you're in ancient Greece and you have the choice to go back. Do you stay with Archimedes then? Do you do the same thing that Indy did? Or that might be too deep of a question for this podcast, but
I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know, honestly. There is a huge part of me that would want to stay and see more.
Yeah.
And I think it would take Helena knocking me out to get me to come back, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a lot here too that I want to be a part of. Like,
Yeah.
so I don't, hopefully my life doesn't get to a point where I'm old and alone and
With a
a
bullet in
professor
you.
at a
Yeah.
community college and a bullet in my kidney. Hopefully not the one that's good.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah. No, fair
um,
point. Fair point. Yeah.
so like another thing about that scene that
Mhm.
I really liked, that speech, I could understand Helena and Indy speaking in Greek,
Oh,
which
because you studied
yes,
ancient Greek.
um,
Yeah.
yes, I did study ancient Greek in college. Um, I can I have a passing familiarity with it, and they were speaking it very well. I think
Mhm.
they were actually speaking ancient Greek, not modern Greek,
Mhm.
and like I studied it a lot. I translated the Iliad, which is a basic thing to do. My big undergrad thesis paper was on New Testament Greek
Mhm.
and authorship and stuff. That was very fun to work on. I loved it to death.
Mhm.
So to go from basically, I got that project done about the time this I went to see this movie.
Mhm.
So like that was all fresh in my head, and then I just see people speaking it aloud, and
Yeah.
I can actually follow some of it.
Yeah.
Um, like that was really, really cool. And I love that. That is not so much a film thing, it's just like Graham loves this stuff.
I don't care. That's
Um,
great. That's
well,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. Um, another like not film thing. This was
Mhm.
the first movie that my wife and I went on a date, like just by ourselves. This is the very
Oh,
first one.
that's a
Like
really
we were,
sweet ending for a movie to see with your wife then. Like, yeah, that's great.
yeah, yeah. Like that is we both took your recommendation, went to go see it, both loved it. Both thought it did Indy very well for
Mhm.
the most part.
Yeah.
Um, and there's some funny anecdotes for issues with the film that I can tell, like just from like I can share my wife's reactions a little bit, and
Yeah.
they're very funny.
Mhm.
So I love it for that too.
Yeah.
Um, as far as film stuff goes, I
Yeah.
love the parade chase. The parade chase is great.
The parade chase when he's on a horse is pretty good. Yeah.
Yes, that's pretty fun. Um, I like that it deals with a lot of history, not just like the history of like one artifact. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, here's the moon landing and Operation Paperclip
Mhm.
and Archimedes in the Battle of Sicily
Mhm.
and you know World War II in general. Like
Yeah.
it deals with all of that and it juggles it very well.
Mhm.
This film gets Indiana Jones movies right in a lot
Yes.
of ways.
Mhm.
Like the villain fails because of arrogance, which is a very classic Indiana Jones thing. He just
Yes.
assumes that he knows what this device is for and that he can
Mhm.
use it. And like every Nazi who tries to use a mystical artifact in Indiana Jones,
Mhm.
they understand it wrong and they
Yes.
get it wrong. And
Belloc
it's
opens the ark and gets fried, and Donovan drinks from the wrong grail and
yes,
dies, and Voller gets the calculations of the Antikythera wrong and dies in a plane exploding because a Roman trireme put a giant spike through the cockpit. Oh,
yep,
it's oh, I love this movie. Anyway,
yes, yes. So like it gets that right. It also gets Indy pretty right.
yeah.
Like it treats Indy well for the most part.
Mhm.
I think there were some decisions that were made for character stuff that were probably not done, um, like with respect to how the character was when he
Mhm.
was left off. But
Mhm.
you know, time skip, and they kind of needed him to be sad to make the resolution at the end work. So
Yeah.
like that makes sense. Um, but they get Sala very right, and
They
I
do.
love the scene when Sala takes him to the airport to go after Helen or Helena,
Mhm.
and I got the sense that these two were old soldiers. They fought together on
Mhm.
the battlefield of keeping these artifacts out of Nazi hands.
Mhm.
And here Indy is going on one last adventure, and Sala wants to go, and
Yeah.
he can't. And he feels you can tell that he is hurt. John Rhys Davies does such a fantastic performance as Sala in the
As
first place.
always, never
Yes, as
disliked
always.
anything that man's been in.
No,
He's
like
great.
he's fantastic actor. Um, I I I really really liked that scene in particular.
Mhm.
And there's so much other little stuff that we could talk about, but like those are the big things for
Oh yeah.
sure.
I
Like
mean, most of my stuff is big things too. Like
yeah,
I love all the space stuff. I mean, hi. But
yeah,
I'm Nate. Hi. But I on a big level, I love that it follows on Crystal Skull. Well, if you
mhm,
only saw the first three, maybe don't watch any of the sequels. Watch Dial of Destiny, but especially if you saw Crystal Skull and were like, oh no, like me, um, watch Dial of Destiny. It's pretty darn good.
Hmm.
I love the time travel aspect of it, which you've covered in detail. But the moment when Indiana Jones realizes that they're going, he's like, it's not 1939, and he realizes that they're over the siege of Syracuse. The whole sequence with the Roman triremes shooting at the planes and the planes shooting back, like the Nazis are panicking, just unloading their machine guns into these Romans because they don't know what to do, is great comedy and also just super entertaining. I love the opening MacGuffin to the movie too. When when
Yes.
when this movie was announced, like, oh, they're going to do Indiana Jones 5. You and I had a conversation when you were still in school about like what artifact should they do, or what should they do, like Atlantis or something, something in Judaism or Christianity or Islam,
Hmm.
or pick an ancient civilization. Should he do El Dorado or something like that, like in National
Yeah.
Treasure 2? Um, and
Yeah.
one of the things that we said was the Spear of Destiny. That
Yes.
was this thing. And so when the movie opened and he's looking for it, I was like, oh, this movie gets Indiana Jones to the extent that I get Indiana Jones. I'm there. Um, I liked that a lot.
Hmm.
But we are bound to fix this film, and it's not perfect. It's no Last
No,
Crusade. It's no Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's good.
it is not.
What would you fix about it? Make the movie better, Graham.
Okay, so I talked a lot about how I like a lot of the characters and the
Mm-hmm.
character work is done. And
Mm-hmm.
I could go more on with that, but there's one character that this film does not do very well. And I've seen this exact same character done well elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's Mason, the young FBI agent or CIA agent, whatever she
Right.
is, working with like she's sort of working with Voller a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, and then like she starts to kind of realize that they're not that they're like actually bad people, and that surprise, they're
Maybe,
Nazis.
maybe Nazis are bad. Yeah.
Maybe
That's
Nazis are bad. Yeah, no, and then she gets killed
yeah.
right after she really has the realization that they're Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was telling Nate this just
Mm-hmm.
before the call started. There's an Amazon Prime show called Hunters, which focuses on a group of Jewish vigilantes who are hunting Nazi survivors
Sounds awesome.
who,
I'm in.
yes, it's also bonkers and weird, which is also really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it focuses on them for the most part. They're hunting Nazis who came to America to work on science programs and things because that was an
Mm-hmm.
Operation Paperclip. That was an
Yeah.
actual thing that was done to keep them out of Soviet hands.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the a lot of bad decisions were made for that, and there's no arguing that. But like,
Nope.
you know,
I agree with that wholeheartedly as someone who works in an industry that was started by Werner von Braun, really.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
something that you have to wrestle with. And the best thing that you can do is, you know, never, just keep yourself and everyone that you know as far away from that ideology as possible.
mhm,
But yeah, so there's this
yeah,
show. It's got a similar character.
very
Um,
similar character.
mhm,
Um, basically, when I saw Mason. I thought they were, and I'm blanking on the other gal's name. I mean,
mhm.
both of them are black women FBI agents.
Yeah.
Like, that's the just like basic character outline for both.
Mhm,
And they both kind of come to the realization that Nazis are working with the American government. Like, they got out of the war, they didn't face any trials for the crimes, all of that.
mhm.
And one of them actually goes on and has a character arc with that. And like, at first she's hunting the Jewish vigilantes, and by the end she's working with them a little bit.
Oh,
And
okay.
in the second season, like, she really is like full on working with them.
Mhm.
Um, in this, like, Mason doesn't really get anything to do,
Yeah.
um, which is really sad because that idea of an agent who is realizing something that is above their pay grade, that is this catastrophic of a moral failing, is a big deal, especially with these ones in particular who are still
Mhm,
acting out, Nazi ideology. Like,
mhm.
Voller has trained some younger men in that ideology, and they're
Yeah.
working with him.
Yes.
Um,
but
so
but
like,
but but this character, she realizes, and then the only time she has to react or process it is the time from when the helicopter is in the air to when the helicopter crashes, or do they not crash? Do they just shoot her? I don't remember.
They just shoot her.
They just shoot her. Okay, but yeah, how do you fix that up though? Like, yeah,
I think you either give her a couple more scenes
mm-hmm.
to try like because I think I know what your fix is, and I think it's going to be cutting stuff. So,
yeah,
and we'll get to
it
that
will.
probably.
Yeah,
Instead of that, like put in some scenes where it's her wrestling with moral choice and maybe like giving Indy and Helena a heads up about something or
mm-hmm.
something else. Um, you know, I feel like this is not the story for that though. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much going on that having her as kind of this wild card that is suddenly just removed from the deck
Yeah,
feels like an expositional tool, but we already knew that Voller was a Nazi because we already saw Voller. Like, if you didn't have that, then maybe it could be different, but
yeah,
the film wouldn't work if we didn't have the scene on the train to open it up.
yeah.
So, like, it feels like she's more an expositional device than a character, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of sucks to be like, just remove this character because there's some cool interactions that she has during the chase scene
Yeah.
in the parade and some other stuff. Like, there's a lot of fun that comes from her character. But by the end of the movie, I was left feeling like there
Yeah,
wasn't
where was
much.
that going? Yeah.
Yeah, there was no need for her in the story. The
Mm-hmm.
story was still going to go back to Syracuse without her.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Which, funnily enough, that's what people say about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, oh, they would have found it and
yeah.
killed themselves anyway. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, like I think that if you remove the character or add more scenes for development, it works well. I think
Mhm.
personally, I was fine with that character. Um, I think that she was underutilized all the same. She could have been a lot more than just, as you said, an expositional tool. I'd cut something out though.
Oh, I know you would.
Okay, so Harrison Ford's getting along in years. He's still doing a great job for being, 12 years old. I don't know how old he
Mhm.
is. But all of the action scenes, for the most part, are chase sequences in this movie. There's the horse one, which is great, and then there's this
Fantastic.
buggy one in Tangier, which
This is the thing that I have to relay my wife's comment on this particular chase.
yes, please do. I would love to know
When
what
we
she
were,
thinks.
when we were in the theater
Yeah.
watching this, she got up to use the restroom at the start of the chase.
Mm-hmm.
She came back like, a handful of minutes later.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I missed nothing. It's still the same chase. Like, she
Yeah.
had time to get up and go to the restroom. Probably could have like got a refill of the drink, got more
Yeah.
popcorn, and you know, she wouldn't have missed anything because that the chase feels really like
It's
it's
redundant.
redundant.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
so like
also it also doesn't pace well. It's
no, it
pretty
doesn't.
it's pretty darn fast, and it's like 10 minutes long. And so, like, the best chase in Indiana Jones, I don't know if it's the best chase in Indiana Jones, but the one that's least like this is the tank chase from Last Crusade, which is really slow. The tank is just hobbling along as this unstoppable force, and Indy, trots up next to it on a horse and has to like take it out.
Yes.
And this chase is like the opposite of that. Their vehicles are tiny and quick, and it just doesn't feel, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. And so I would, at the very least, just take it out. Or I would replace it with something significantly slower, either a fist fight, or some kind of situational slow moving chase sequence. But that's what I would do. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think of my fix?
I would honestly, if there wasn't an issue with Mason, that would be my fix too. Like, I would take it out because, like, that only happens because Helena's ex shows up. Like, you don't have to do that
Oh
because
my
he's the
God,
one
you're
who
right.
starts that
Oh my
chase.
God, you're right. Yeah, he shows
Yeah,
up and he's
like
mad about stuff, and
then
they take off after each other. The Nazis are barely
and that
involved.
gives and it gives the Nazis a chance to catch up and then get the Antikythera, which like you can
Yeah,
just have them get the Antikythera in the auction.
yeah,
You can just have them do that.
yeah.
You don't have to have Indian Helena win and then do the car chase in Tangiers
And
because
then
somebody's a jilted ex. Like,
yeah.
sure, it provides like a laugh in the theater.
It played for
But
comedy, but it
yeah,
wasn't all
no.
that it could have been.
No.
Okay, audience. Which fix would you implement? Would you remove the buggy car chase in basically what is Mos Eisley, or Star Wars reference, or would you either tune up or remove the character of Mason, who was the CIA lady who was working with the Nazis and realized too late the thing that Graham and I were taught from childhood, which that Nazis are bad. But yeah, that's your choice. What do you think? Let us know down in the comments in the doobly-doo. And in the meantime, like, comment, and subscribe. All of that stuff. All right. I think we're going to wrap this episode up. Hope it finds you well.
Thanks.
See ya.